Welcome to Remarkable WAM.
Something, and I'll immediately get the reward and satisfaction of having a go.
Absolutely.
And meanwhile, I'm sure my deep subconscious is percolating an idea for somewhere else in the world.
Very good.
There's always that hope, isn't there, Andy? Your deep subconscious is actually doing something.
yeah. If not, I'll just sit in a chair and rock backwards. We're off. We've got Trevor in the house, Chris. How exciting is this?
I know it is. It is. And look, Trevor in Trevor's style has been asking me too many difficult questions. You know, most of the other guests, you know, they just roll with it. But Trevor's all about preparation. I know. And so
loads of PowerPoint slides ready.
No, but I'm actually quite worried about what's going to happen if in fact he is going to want to take over with PowerPoint slides, and it's a little bit disturbing. But look, Andy, you know me. We'll just have to soldier on. You know, we have a mission, but Trevor might derail it. We never know.
Sorry.
It's Trevor the storm in our otherwise placid ocean.
You can.
I might churn things up a bit, but it's a very noble cause you guys are on, and I'm inspired to be part of it. In fact, here's my first prop of the day.
Oh, no, look, I told you.
One of the reasons I agreed to do this is because of this book. Is this reverse round?
It is, but if what is fine.
No, I'll sort that out, because otherwise this looks silly.
That's actually the first edition of.
It is exactly right.
It came out.
The reason I'm so inspired to be part of this is because Andy worked at this company, and this is an amazing book that I read, and it's pre-social media, so it's really, really good read. 20 years later, so I'm very inspired to be part of one of your sessions, Andy. And Chris, what can I say, right? Every session is laugh a minute, so inspiring, and I just can't wait.
Where's your prop, Chris? Come on, where's your prop?
Where's my look, I'll get one in a moment, don't worry.
Maybe one of the pewter mugs hanging from the ceiling in your bar.
No, nothing.
Be prepared.
I think this might be sand from Bermuda. I don't know.
Just
Bermuda. Right. Let's set the scene. Let's set the scene for our listeners. So that we are, I think by now we've got to about 8 or 9 or 10, depends on which order we release these. But we're obviously myself, Chris Mills, Andy Reid. We're co-hosting a series called Remarkable WAM. We are striving to talk to remarkable people with fantastic stories across their career who have something to say about wealth and asset management. And I think that we have a mission to try and unpack some of that, the mystique around the industry, but to try and really work out what is the benefit, what can be really useful for the man or woman on the street, the end consumer. That's the sort of direction of travel we're on. I don't know if I said that right this time, Andy. Is that what have I
think you tumbled into it with aplomb.
Did I?
Yeah. Our mission is noble and just, as you know, Trevor. I certainly believe that one of the last strongholds of innovation and creative thinking could be the world of asset wealth management. But behind the scenes, I know from having been on these podcasts that there's a tremendous amount of innovative thinking and creative thinking and smart people working hard to solve tough challenges. But our belief is that a lot of that creativity is inward facing. And genuinely, if we want to make a difference in the world, one of the things that we can do, which feels a little bit easier to manage than stopping the seas becoming polluted with plastic, is actually get people saving, investing, making better choices around their wealth. And if we can start to do that now and start to join up the end consumer to this huge industry of wealth management, then that's a great thing to get involved with. And it will involve people, thinking, some provocation and some rule breaking. And all of those things come together to great ideas. And you know that because 20 years ago you read that book that you just waved in front of us once upon a time. So I'm excited by it. I thoroughly enjoy these podcasts. I learn a lot, and it's just more fuel for our endeavour. Is it not, Chris?
I think so. So let me. I'll set the scene with our guest, and then we'll launch into talking to Trevor. So today we're joined by the impassioned and knowledgeable Trevor Hunt. I believe, Trevor, that you started your career as a programmer. So watch out, Andy, for any questions. Before joining Nomura Bank, rising to the head of IT. You then spent 15 years or so in UBS Global Asset Management, becoming the global head of asset management operations. Before joining, I think that's where we bumped into each other first. And you were supremely kind even then. So even when I knew nothing. But before that, after that, you then, I know that you joined Columbia Threadneedle and helped deliver some of their biggest and hairiest programs of work. You moved to become the CTO and Chief Information Officer of MUFG Investor Services after that. And you're now working in, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the sort of CTO advisory space for Behind Every Cloud. And from what I've seen, thoroughly enjoying yourself. Hello, Trevor. How are you?
Chris, thank you very much, and Andy as well. Yes, that's a great. I feel humbled. Having someone else tell me about my career. It's normally the other way round, right? I normally give a much longer version of it, but you've certainly got some of the key points there. And yes, I'm very enthused to be part of the conversation today. I come with a few bits of collateral that I might flash up on the screen. But so what are we going to talk about? Are we going to have a hot story? What do you want to do?
Normally we rewind back to the beginning and start at that time when you were a small young lad after that marvelous story in being driven to Brands Hatch. But is that unfair question is, when you were that small boy, when did you first realize that you wanted to become a programmer and join financial services? How did you start?
Well, at the end of the day, a lot of this, it's luck, isn't it? It's luck of the draw and coincidence and opportunity. So I was a bit of a rebel in my grammar school. I did not want to go to university. I thought, no, I'd had a taste of college doing technical drawing, engineering drawing, and I at A level, and I wanted to continue down that path of doing practical kind of skills rather than theoretical skills. And so I rebelled, didn't do university. I did a sponsored HND with GC Avionics, which gave me my first taste of programming. And around that time, I met my wife of nearly 30 years, Elizabeth, and she was an RBS banker in the City of London. Really? And she said to me, "Oh, Trevor, you should really come and work in the City of London. You don't have to wait for people to die to be promoted in GEC. You can come to London, and your career will go like a rocket ship." And so I interviewed for a number of companies. I ended up working for what was actually a very small, what we call today a fintech. Well, it wasn't called that back in those days. It was 8 blokes programming some of the very first FX trading systems that were ever developed, late 80s, around the time of FX Big Bang. And so it's really coincidence, right, that I ended up there thanks to my wife. It's actually in Chelmsford rather than London, so she wasn't too pleased about that. But I was working in banks, some of the Japanese banks, and that started my whole kind of Japanese connection that sort of pervades the rest of my career. So that's it. That's how it all started.
And what did you think about that? How did you view at that time sort of technology in financial services? What was your view then? Was it a strange magic world, or was it?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've been thinking a lot about this year, actually. In my job title was head of data processing, because back in those days it wasn't called technology. It was only the early 90s that we started to call things technology.
Yeah.
So I was head of data processing. I really wound up with my boss for calling me that. I said, no, I want to be head of tech. No, you can't do that, Trevor. You've got to be head of data processing. So yeah, that's how it all started. And I have to say, I was, again, fortunate that I started managing people quite early as well. I think technologists are typically very unskilled at managing people because they manage computers and computers do what you say. People don't. So my first sort of management assignment was a group of 7 women who were in the telex room, and they had to put things into a mainframe, do the telexing, do the faxing. It was a baptism of fire in terms of people management.
Were you given that because you were some kind of ladies' man in those early days? Was that you just knew how to handle that? Was it, yeah, you see, yeah.
No, not at all. It was just, back to your point. Technology was just viewed as it was very much a support organization, right? And a kind of, do we really need these people around? I remember walking through the dealing rooms and, just having stuff thrown at you because you worked in IT, right? Yeah, look at that. My system's not working. Trevor, come over here and sort this out, right? It was a very predatory kind of zone.
It's fascinating that now technology is often seen as the leading chapter of any conversation in a business, and
exactly
people support for tech because tech is at the heart of the proposition that's fixing a problem in the world.
Yep.
And then, but way behind the scenes, when that tech isn't working, people start throwing people at the system engineers to fix it. But these poor folk are probably in a different time zone rather than the proximity that you described, Trevor, getting, I don't know, pens and marker boards thrown at you. But this change didn't happen overnight. It sort of toppled through, didn't it? Yeah,
it did. Absolutely. It took a while for people to understand what technology actually was. Again, reading recently about this, it's a fascinating word, actually. Technology. Do you know where it comes from? It's a Greek word.
Greek, isn't it?
Yeah, techne. Let me just bring up my notes while I'm sitting here.
It's not a minty sauce, is it?
No, definitely not.
Oh no, that's taxi.
It's a Greek word that means how you treat art and craft. So in the Middle Ages, there was no word technology. It didn't exist. People used to use mechanical arts as the word that represented what we today call technology.
So in the Grand Renaissance or when science started to question some of the ecclesiastical philosophies of the time, there was no word to...
No, it was the mechanical arts. It's only in the early 90s that news, traders, books started to refer to it as technology, and that was the collection of things like word processors, calculators, PCs as they started to appear. It's only then that people started to talk about technology.
But it's a good thing you want to, yeah.
Box of buttons.
So there's 2 strands that I think would be really useful to explore, Trevor. So we're thinking about, let's just term it at the moment, the future of wealth and understanding where that goes. And I know, but with your history around technology, mechanical arts, operations, managing people, there's that future of, let's just call it future of technology for now, in that sense. And I think it'd be really interesting to see how you see those evolving over that time period since you've started your career. Maybe even, what makes a good head of technology now, as opposed to when you started your career, and similarly on that wealth journey, what are the sort of ingredients that we need to be taking forward to improve that role? choose your path.
Gosh. There's a lot of different ways we can go there, isn't there? And I'd say let's quickly do the technology, but then I'll take us down a slightly different route, if I may, around the wealth and asset management space specifically as it relates to individuals. So on the technology side, there's no doubt that it has changed in terms of its importance. And I don't know if you remember the IT Crowd, the TV series,
yes.
right, where the guys are down in the basement and it's a complete mess, and the CEO spends his time deliberately ignoring them and not, I've lived that life, right? That was very much what it was like in the early 90s, where technology was not recognized at all. Like I said, it was called data processing. And I think what happened is there was a need for IT to sort of formalize itself. Right. And it sort of turned something like a centralized power, more or less, right? The IT department is where you go to get your requirements defined. There'll be business analysts there. You'll then get your architects to design a solution, and then you get your programmers to deliver it, right? Very much centralized power, kind of exclusive, central governance, standards, ITIL, all this kind of stuff was going on. And that served its purpose in terms of creating a stable, dare I say it, environment for some of these big applications to get developed, right? Some of these ERP systems, for example, would not exist if it wasn't for those centralized controls that were necessary. Same with planes, right? You wouldn't want your engine management system or your navigation system done in a modern, agile kind of way, because you'd want to know that the plane's not going to fall out of the air while it's flying. Now, what's happened, I think, particularly over the last 10 years, as there's been this change to be decentralized about how we think about technology. You've now got cloud, which enables you to scale up your solution to whatever, degree you want to, depending on what kind of solution you're putting in place. And I think with that, the role of technology is changing to be more of someone who's a collaborator, and who's got a good relationship with people in the business. And here's the classic one that I think is very ingrained. There's a divide between business and IT. And it feels like it's been there for some time, but it's beginning to change. And that's, in my case, I kind of realized this in the mid 2000s, right? I was a head of IT working in Asia, and was going to all these executive committee meetings at UBS. And I just didn't understand what was being talked about, right? Because I'd spent 15 years in tech talking binary to everyone, and all of a sudden I'm hearing about the business and sales and employee engagement and all these wonderful terms that I'd never come across before. I had no idea about. And so I decided, right, I've got to learn about the business that I'm in, and I switched out of technology into operations. I also did an MBA to help me put tools in my toolbox to understand the business that I was actually supporting. And I think many technologists would benefit from making that switch in their career, in and out, right? Being able to really understand what makes a business tick, what your customers want, all the dynamics of running a company.
So is this, and by the way, I'll say something that struck me about you, Trevor, on a personal level, is that you're one of those people I know that is absolutely embraces that perpetual learning. You're always trying to learn something else. And that you mentioned your MBA, and I think that's a prime example. You come up with a bit of a barrier. I don't know what's going on. Well, I'll go away and fix it.
Yeah,
And
yeah, exactly.
I applaud you for that, and I think that's a if you want a role model, then you are it.
Yeah, but thank you. But I do agree with you entirely. It is so easy, I think, to rest on laurels, and particularly in the field of technology, things are changing so quickly.
Yes.
If you do rest on your laurels, you get left behind.
Yeah.
And so you have to stay current with everything that's going on across what's a very, very wide spectrum of different technologies these days, and it just keeps getting wider and wider.
What seems fascinating about how you described it there, Trevor, is that you talked about technology being a silo, and then you talked about it being it's part of every bit of the business. So guess what? You move from being the technologist to being a communication layer. So actually, so the skills, does the skill set change from being the best programmer to being the best translator?
Yeah.
Is that where you are? Is that where it should be?
Yeah, I absolutely. I think that's so key, right? And look, it's not for everyone. You can't have every programmer turn into a man manager, because you're not playing to your strengths. But definitely, it's the case that we're turning into, our companies are turning into more tech savvy organizations, right? People understand more about the technology that they're using, and so therefore, do you really need a central technology department with a capital T, or do you just have people that understand how to deploy and use that technology within certain guide rails, right? You can't have, Wild West, everyone do anything that they want, but within certain guide rails, businesses should be able to deploy the technology that they need.
And in the short term, do you think that, and this is, I guess this is part of the problem, but do you think that you need either a CTO or a chief digital officer or chief information officer at board level, or do you need to, or do you need to be raising the technology experience of those decision makers?
I think it's much more pervasive than that, Chris. I think with the generational shifts, people are coming into the organization already with the skill sets that are required to use and deploy the technology, especially, as I said, as a result of cloud. So I'll give a real example of this. In my last place, the HR department started to use Power BI, which is a great data analytics tool available on Microsoft Azure, and nobody from my team had anything to do with it, right? The lady had just gone out and done it. She was producing all this amazing reporting that the board had never seen before about, what HR was doing, and turnover of staff and sentiment of staff and all this great stuff. And we'd done nothing, right? The person who'd come in just had all the tools and knowledge to be able to do that. So again, as long as you've got the guide rails, then companies can be successful employing people with the skill set to deliver this. And back to your point about CIOs at board level, there's a certain value to that, but I think also you're somewhat diluting the power of a top level exec committee the more people you put on it. Right. You talk about a CIO being on there. Well, the security officer wants to be on there as well, right? Because cybersecurity is so important. I got to report to the CEO. The chief marketing officer, I got to be there as well. And then you think to yourself, well, what's the COO for, right? Well, it doesn't do anything anymore, right? We might have a few operations people, but that's about it. So I think it does make sense, but in certain organizational constructs, it doesn't, because you just dilute the decision making power of an execco.
Trevor, parallel to this conversation, because Chris spoke about the two strands there. So I've been listening to this. The tech story is the technology has changed. It's moving very quickly, which is it's not a cliche. It's it's moving really, really fast. Things are constantly changing. Therefore, we can't rest on our laurels by knowing of the careers you can. Yeah, it's okay to be schooled in something once and then just carry on. But
Mm.
it'd be a fool's paradise to imagine that you could do that with tech. And your point there about at senior level, senior people in the room will already have access to tools and familiarity with technology to make decisions. So there's the tech landscape. To our mission about humanizing wealth, what's your take on the wealth journey? Has people's relationship with wealth changed? Has people's demands on what you provide for them moved as quickly? What has business had to do in order to not rest on its laurels relating to the wealth, the propositions in the wealth?
Yeah, so this sort of comes to the second part of what I wanted to talk about today, guys. So I think that we don't do enough to educate people at a younger age about the importance of wealth management. In my case, I got to my 40s when I was sort of mid MBA, when I started to think about the whole, what's wealth going to mean to me going forward. And that was because I was learning about things like economics and the way the markets were working in international trade. Even though I'd been working in financial services for 20 years, it wasn't a passion and an interest and something that I'd been taught way back at school. So I think we got to do more to make wealth and asset management attractive and interesting, and dare I say it, sexy to a generation that's the age of my daughter, right? Is 14, right? I'd like her to begin to understand what she's got to learn about to become financially independent in time.
And your 14-year-old will have more affiliation with what tech can do for her.
Correct.
And maybe other generations, although I believe technology just takes different forms. So 300 years ago, technology was an arch, it was a bow and an arrow or a shovel.
Yes.
I'm not being glib. I mean, it just manifests in different ways.
It does.
So if we can bring forward the relationship and the strength of her interaction with technology and make her see that it's good to use that for other things apart from self-promotion.
Indeed, exactly.
That's a sweet spot, perhaps.
Yeah, and in getting ready for this discussion, I went back to some of my early learnings from my lovely wife. She taught me. She told me about this person she used to work with in RBS, and he said to her, "This is like a good 30 years ago or so. When you're thinking about your wealth, you want to split things three ways. You need to strike a balance." I use this phrase quite a lot. You need to strike a balance between investments in your house, your home where you live, your investments, it could be pension, could be shares, could be whatever, and your cash. If you've got those three pillars of assets as part of your wealth, that will guide you through all of the ups and downs that happen over time. Now, I think today, everyone's, especially where we are here in 2021 in the latest boom, everyone's going crazy about, right, I got to invest in Bitcoin or shares because everything's going crazy. But we all know that there are perpetual cycles that happen, and it will pop, something will blow, and all those people that are max on shares, that are allocated maximum, it's going to hurt, right? So if you strike a balance all the way through and you think about your investments from an early time in those those thirds of the circle, you should end up with a balanced position over time.
I think it's really interesting you say that, because the first thing I was thinking about was that I entirely agree with you. I think there are principles of wealth that look, they're never universally applicable on all situations. However, as you talked about guidelines or guiding lights, and I absolutely agree with you. I think we've talked about this before. There are definitely principles that make sense both for individuals and for institutions, and looking after wealth, that whole journey. That I think, I remember years ago, my school introduced me to put money in the TSB account. Now I don't even know if that's allowed and possible. A commercial bank going into a school and forcing 6-year-olds, 8-year-olds, whatever I was, to put money into a TSB account, but that's good practice.
Yeah,
that's a good thing to start ingraining those habits, and that's what I think that would be really useful to develop those habits. But and your point about risk is that I was thinking again. I read an article the other day that talked about Pure Gym. I saw, so I think it was on BBC. Supposedly he's losing something like the owner of Pure Gym, and you'd have thought 2 years ago, or just before pandemic, investments into gym and fitness is a pretty good bet. That's what you'd have thought.
Yeah.
Over the last year, it's been the worst bet you could possibly think of, maybe vying with hotels. So, and so you're absolutely right. Diversifying and spreading your risk. That balance matters to everyone, big, small, large corporates to the individual.
What, Trevor, could you, with your sort of wise, learned head, these pieces of advice that we're looking at are with the benefit of hindsight, which I have a doctorate in, right? So is there a way of getting...
I'll have to call you that from now on, Dr. Hindsight.
Doctor of hindsight, yeah, well... You kind of get experience by making mistakes, don't you? So, but to a 14-year-old version of Chris, sorry, to your 14-year-old daughter and 8-year-old version of Chris, you're saying, right, I don't own a home, so talking to people about physical assets and such as the responsibility of holding down a castle is one thing. Cash means very little today. I mean, the concept of cash, does anyone use cash anymore? It's all on cards and apps and stuff. And I know it's my son's mental arithmetic because we can't put coins on the table to practice maths. And pension, that's what my gran uses. So these are concepts that a particular generation don't yet have an affiliation with. So how do we cross that divide? How do we, above the sincerity of saying to our next generation, you need to invest in the future, and here's my advice, take it. What else can we do to get them, asking us what they need?
I mean, if there was a magic answer to this, I'm sure it would have already been done. But I hold out hope for something like gamification, actually, because I've observed recently that gamification of things turns it into an enjoyable experience to learn about things. And whilst there's things like the Game of Life or the Sims or something like that, that goes some of the way towards it, doesn't it? But I don't know. Maybe if you can bring these sort of abstract concepts into things that children of that kind of age, or young people of that kind of age, can really grab and understand. If it's some kind of simulation that says, look, this is what will happen if you do this, it wouldn't be too difficult to build some models around it, would it? I mean, we already have all these pension simulators and things that you get off your provider. It wouldn't be too hard to sort of bring it right back to school age.
The hardest thing, well, I say one of the hard things I've often recognised in that, and I agree with you, Trevor. I think that could certainly unlock a lot of that interaction. That's what you want, isn't it? The problem with finance is it's not sexy, it's not immediate, it's not bloody gory or fast, and you don't get and your points don't rack up in an obvious way. But you could start to play in that way. The problem is, of course, is that the benefits of wealth are often in excess of 10 years or 15 years, not the dare I say, the instant gratification that is brushed over millennials and Gen Zs, and it's not true.
Well, just when you were saying that, Chris, would I get a dopamine rush immediately knowing that I've got peace of mind for the future? If I could turn the benefit of Trevor's advice, I'm going to split my wealth across home, cash, and pensions. And I make a decision now, and I get my instant star or my well done you or 800 floats above me, like in the old arcade games.
Yeah,
that would give me the immediate rush and reward that are so important in games, albeit I'm not physically receiving the benefits of my decision making. I wonder if that's a place to explore.
Yeah, you mean like a leaderboard, don't you? That kind of thing.
Where Trevor's in the lead in getting his future ready.
But I do think that's the hardest thing with the wealth market. It's hard to explain the consequences of some of these decisions. The feedback loop is quite long.
Yeah.
So you can't tell whether you're doing the right thing, and you're absolutely right. Dr. Hindsight over there, and all of us when we become Professor Hindsight is that, oh, I wish I'd put £5 into a savings account 40 years ago, because guess what? I'd have £20,000 now, type thing. And that, what is it? I don't even know if it's true. Do you know Einstein actually said, compound interest was the
eighth wonder of the world?
Yeah, and that lesson doesn't resonate with many people at all, really. Certainly not an 8-year-old or a 14-year-old. But you're optimistic, Trevor, that these things will coalesce. I mean, I'm optimistic that the levels of knowledge on all of these things, be it technology, be it economics. I thought economics was a ridiculous subject. Now I think it's one of the best subjects you can probably study. It's great because I just think it's fascinating, all of the elements around platforms and pricing and all of this. But I think that all of these levels of knowledge are creeping up. Hopefully, we'll get the synthesis of a few gems at the top that actually make that difference.
I completely agree. And back to my school days, I was always very good at applied subjects rather than theoretical subjects, right? So pure maths, I was rubbish. Applied maths, I could roughly work out the answer. Now, maybe if the subject at school we taught was wealth rather than economics, it would be very, very interesting, right? It's the practical application of economics to individuals.
Yeah, no, I think that's fascinating. So we're gonna. There's two things that I'm going to. We'll move on to in a moment. What's next for Trevor in 2021? What is the future? What are your projects that you're working on at the moment? But it seems like there's a good time for a quiz. If you're up for that, Andy,
bring it on. Bring it on.
Have you got your mascot?
I have no mascot. I don't need superstitious charm to get me through this quiz. I'm prepared. I'm just ready to go. I'm just stalling and filibustering. Let's go. Come on, Trevor.
So Trevor, just so you know, there are 5 questions.
Yep.
Which there are multiple choice of 4 answers. Mm-hmm. So even Andy should be able to get one. And look, he's got an enviable record in this, but it's a head-to-head, so don't hold back, okay? Don't hold back. It is biased towards your CV and interests, although as I said earlier, I didn't quite realise how much of a petrol head you were. So no questions about internal combustion engines or vehicles of that nature. I do apologise.
That's fine.
So let me draw away questions. Right. And we'll find the answers at the end. So question 1. This is a serious question. You studied an MBA at Birmingham University. So which 2 prime ministers are alumni of Birmingham University? Is it, you must know this, you studied there. Is it A, Clement Attlee and Anthony Eden? Is it B, Stanley Baldwin and Neville Chamberlain? Is it C, Margaret Thatcher and Edward Heath? Or D, Theresa May and James Callaghan? Who would study at Birmingham University out of those? I'm going to let Trevor go first this time.
No idea. So I'm going to say D.
D, Theresa May and James Callaghan.
Yeah.
Okay, Andy?
Pretty sure Theresa May is the MP for Maidenhead, which is up the way, so I would have heard about Attlee and Eden.
Attlee and Eden. A it is.
I'm going for A.
So on topic of wealth, and again to your CV, question 2, as of 31st of December 2020, and we may have alluded to one of these numbers before, Andy. So how many invested assets does UBS Asset Management run on behalf of its clients as of the end of last year? So is it A, 0.9 trillion, B, 1.1 trillion, C, 1.2 trillion, D, 1.3 trillion?
That's so mean. I can't believe you've done that.
So Andy.
This type of question theme has come up before.
I know.
UBS, they're a big wig in the wigwam. 1.3 trillion assets under management with the global super behemoth that is UBS.
You're going for the big one. Trevor. you feel some kind of professional.
I know. Should know this. I'm going to get a lot of spam if I get this wrong. I'll do 1.2.
1.2. What's that? C, I believe. Okay.
Yes.
Trevor, thankfully, I know that you love Japan and Japanese culture. We have a question about Japan. According to Wikizilla, which of these is not a monster to have fought Godzilla? I'm expecting this to be a specialist subject, Trevor. This is why.
Absolutely.
Are you ready? Which of these is not a monster? A, jet jaguar. B, mecha jellyfish. C, pteranodon robot. Or D, Godzillasaurus.
Oh my God. Did you make these up?
No, I only made one of them up. That's the whole point.
Oh,
The others, some lovely people in Japan made up.
Yeah, these are going to be huge graphic novels, aren't they?
Are you ready? So
what was the last one?
You had jet jaguar, mecha jellyfish, pteranodon robot, and Godzillasaurus. How can you not remember the last one? That's the best one.
Okay.
Good.
I'm gonna go with D.
You think I made that up? Excellent.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, I do.
No, I reckon. I think it's got to be. It's either mecha jellyfish or pteranodon robot. Jet jaguars plausible.
You think jet jaguars? Carry on.
Pteranodon robot, please.
Pteranodon robot. That is C. Excellent. Question 4. Again, specialist subject, Trevor. You are currently at the firm Behind Every Cloud. But which of these typically is the highest cloud formation? Oh, look, he's looking optimistic. Is it A, stratus or stratus? Is it B, cirrus? C, altocumulus? Or D, cumulonimbus? What's up, Andy?
What? No, I know. I think I know this one.
Oh,
I think I do as well.
excellent. Now,
Having done 7 years in the Air Training Corps, I should know this. And it's Andy first, isn't it?
well, look, it is, and I'll just say one thing that might assist you, and I don't want anybody to get upset. One of these typically, can span a number of different levels, but it's almost like the lowest level typically that they reach. So what's the highest of the lowest level, if that makes sense?
Yeah.
So
what's the highest found of these shaped clouds? Which is the highest in the sky? Is that the question?
yeah, but one of them, and I don't know exactly. One of them is often quite vertical.
Oh yeah, no.
What I mean is, I don't want you to think. Like, let's say the average height of it. Where's the average? That's all.
It's turned into the weather station now, hasn't it? Cumulus nimbus is at the bottom because they're the fluffy clouds. It's stratus, which is usually associated with really high pressure, and that's right at the very top of the atmosphere. I'm going A. Stratus, as in stratospheric.
Okay.
He's right. That's what it is.
You think it's stratus?
Yep.
Yeah.
Excellent.
That word was written on the other side of the lollipop stick that told me about technology is the Greek word for mechanized art.
Really? What sort of lollies are you eating?
Really long ones.
Question 5 and the last question, back to Japan. What is the average life expectancy of women in Japan? Yes, I know. These are all great. No, the reason I ask is for some reason, and I did a reasonable search on this. Official figures I've only got from 2018, but you just have to roll with me on this one. I don't think it's plummeted since then. Is it A, 85.3 years, B, 87.3 years, 89.3 years, or 91.3 years?
God, I'm moving to Japan.
I'll take D, 91.3.
D. Andy.
What the average age of a woman in 91 years of age in Japan?
They're extraordinarily high, aren't they? And I'll ask you a question about,
It's all that food in vending machines. That's why. 89.3 C.
C, 89.3.
But for variety and tension for our listener, because if I agree with Trevor, it's not going to be a quiz. There you go. I could have thrown away the trophy then, Trevor, but sport's the winner.
Sports the winner. Excellent.
So the score's on the doors.
Are you ready for the answers?
Mm-hmm.
I feel I'm going to be in trouble in this one. However, let's carry on. Question 1. MBA at Birmingham University, 2 Prime Minister's alumni is in fact Stanley Baldwin and Neville Chamberlain. B. So I'm afraid neither of you won on that account. Question 2. Yes, Trevor. Are you ready? Question 2. According to their own website, UBS Asset Management, and their phrasing is invested assets, they manage 1.1 trillion, which is B.
200 million was sold in the last 24 hours. How's that?
Okay. I mean, it begs. We've talked about this before, Trevor, about size of asset managers, and they're firmly in that $1 trillion club.
Yes,
absolutely. And it's kind of what what do they do with it?
What's interesting, Chris, it comes back to what I was saying, is how things have changed over time. So up to the credit crisis, 2007, they were running at getting close to $1 trillion, right? Getting close to $1 trillion. They were pretty big. And then when the credit crisis hit and everyone wanted their money back, they went down to, 600, 700, something like that. They lost a lot. The same was true 2000s after the tech boom. Same sort of thing happened. So but it's good to see that in general it's going up.
They've always been a top 10, haven't they? Maybe maybe in the top 5, I think, haven't they, in that space?
I think if you include wealth management as well, absolutely. But if you're just talking about asset management, they're a top 20 player typically.
Yeah. So unfortunately,
neither
of you got it right. Your favourite question. Godzilla has fought all of these characters, according to Wikizilla, which I think is aptly named in of itself. Which of these is not a monster to have fought Godzilla? The answer is mecha jellyfish.
Crying out, it's such a stupid game.
So we're going to end up with no scores in this. So there's going to be a decider. I hope you got a decider.
In a fictitious world where there's giant huge dinosaurs beating each other up, someone has already come up with pterodon robot.
Yes. And Godzillasaurus, I just think sounded cool.
Oh, I think that's when brainstorms go wrong and they were tired and it was a Friday afternoon. Oh, I'll just call it Godzillasaurus. Let's go to the pub. I hear there's some 91.3-year-olds.
But most importantly, Chris, you came up with mecha jellyfish.
It wasn't
Right, didn't you?
Yes,
you did.
Look, it wasn't within the family of Godzilla monsters. It really wasn't an outlier. I can tell you that much. It was quite easy to come up with something. Lego Blob Monster would have probably done. But anyway,
radiator fan.
So unfortunately, no points. Right, question 4. This may be controversial. I'm worried now. I'll have to refer back to my sources. However, according to Wikipedia, the highest cloud formation is actually Cirrus. Cirrus.
Yeah, I knew it. Ah!
The one that cumulonimbus is the storm clouds. So the black cloud that sort of towers up.
Cirrus.
Stratus or stratus is actually the lowest. So
is it?
Sorry, yeah,
Is it?
Yes, it is.
Oh crap, Trevor! You and I ought not to be navigating an aircraft ever. We'll stove it into the wrong part of the sky. Okay. Naught.
Isn't it true that I read something like often you get novice pilots might go into dense heavy cloud formations and a remarkably high percentage of the time they'll be coming out flying upside down. I did hear that. Is
this what about the passengers that they're flying at the time?
I don't think they were talking about a Dreamliner, but these days who knows?
Come on then, it's all down to the decider.
Yeah, it's all down to Japanese women.
Are you ready?
Mm.
Which of the average life expectancy of women in Japan is inexplicably high at 87.3?
Oh no. So that's it. There must be a decider. I hope you got a decider. Otherwise,
Trevor, we got nothing.
I know.
Nothing. Can we end on a tie? Can we just don't spoil it? Because we're equal. Yeah. We're equally naive.
Do you want? Look, on that basis,
no, don't want to decide. That's good enough. Don't worry.
No, because look, you're right. If you'd have scored some points, then you could live with the fact that you lost the decider. The fact that neither of you scored any points just means that it will be ultra cruel to the loser. So
we'll have another quiz another time, Trevor.
You both got precisely this. You were both first. Well.
When the pubs finally open, Trevor, I pledge that I will come to find a local pub and we can all three of us be on the same pub quiz team and we can lock heads together and we'll come out on top. Yeah?
Can't wait. Can't wait.
That's our pledge. Let's do that instead.
So anyway, the last question was a little bit of a segue. I'm just really interested to think about talking about that future of wealth and Japanese ladies clearly live to an extraordinarily long time these days. And that's part of the problem with wealth as well, is that it's just not designed for our current living. Mm. The fact that we have multiple jobs, pensions themselves are ill-designed, I think, to cope for that. Mm. So, these are all the things that we need to be evolving towards in how we approach all of this.
Which is why it's so important to educate people about it early so that there is time to do something about it. That's another thing that has been very important to me since stepping away from big corporate has been the importance of time and how you use that time effectively. So the earlier we start talking to people, educating children, young people about the importance of what life will look like for them in 50, 60 years, or maybe even 100 years, right, given what's going on with medical technology, the better, most definitely.
So I think, moving on to that, the last point, which is, what does 2021 look like for you, Trevor? I do see what you're doing now. You know, that role of CTO advisory. You're sharing your knowledge. You're sharing your wisdom. I see it. I see it every week. Are you enjoying that? You know, what's the best thing about that role? And, you know, how do you think 2021 is going to look for you?
So, you mentioned Behind Every Cloud, and I greatly enjoy working with the Behind Every Cloud team. But at the same time, I'm also doing work with another organisation called Change Gap that you're familiar with, doing regulatory change, and that's what I'd like to continue to do. Actually, is sort of broaden the portfolio, so it's not just focused on one particular vertical or solution set or whatever, but to take all of the learnings I've got from the past to, like you say, to help others. And this is where this whole time thing comes in. I want to be able to give back. I realized this when I came to the end of my time at UBS 6 years ago, that I'd been on the take for many, many years, right? Working in financial services, you're vastly overpaid for the job that you do, vastly. My other half is a nurse. My son's working in Great Ormond Street Hospital. My other son's a vaccinator. I'm kind of the wild one who's not associated with the health service at the moment. But I decided when I left UBS that I wanted to start doing more in terms of giving back, and that's what I do. I do it in the work that I do, and volunteering that I do when that's possible, and that's what gets me up in the morning. That's what keeps me motivated. That's what keeps me learning as well. Is if I don't keep learning, then I won't be relevant to those people that I'm giving advice to. As soon as you stop learning, you know there's a time associated with your value.
You did it, you know, we talked about your MBA and how you went out, you know, and took that as a challenge to learn about business and you know, commercial world, etc. You did the same with blockchain and cryptocurrencies. You went off and did a course that was at the Said Business School, wasn't it? So
that's right. Yeah, I've done it all the way through actually, and I'm feeling a bit guilty at the moment because I'm not formally learning anything at the moment, and really I should be, because you know, just to stay relevant. But yes, I mean, again, after I left UBS, I actually did what's it called, the CIM, Chartered Institute of Marketers.
Oh, did you do that as well?
I did a course with those guys, because in 10 years from doing MBA to 2015, 16. Marketing, you know this more than anyone, Andy. Marketing changed incredibly, right? It used to be about, you know, marketing campaigns and getting your posters out and all this kind of stuff. And suddenly, social media changed everything. And so, what was the importance of SEO and having a digital marketing strategy suddenly became super important. So I just did that, just to stay relevant with what's going on in the world.
So have you got any targets you can share for the year, or any goals that you can have you crystallized anything in that way?
Yeah, I mean they're quite straightforward things, right? I don't have any, what do you call them, BHAGs, big hairy audacious goals, right? I don't have any of those. I'm 55 this year, so in theory I can tap into my pension. I've got no intention of doing that, but it's an option. I want to now, in the spirit of giving back, I actually want to start setting up my kids for their life going forward, right? My son got married in October. I want to do something for him so that he can go and get himself his, first step on the property ladder. Similarly, my second son, he's renting at the moment with his partner in Highgate. I'd like to do something to help him. So just incremental things to help in the time that I have. Right, that's what's important.
No, it's fascinating. And I got two other questions, which are going back to that corporate world. You mentioned working in the regulatory space as well. You've mentioned some of the cost issues across the industry, but if there was something that, if you had that magic wand, to either to stop the industry doing something or to initiate, a new thing. Have you got any idea? What would your magic wand waving do? What would you wish for? Was it more regulation? Would it be?
There certainly isn't more regulation.
Because that's the
no.
Maybe it'd be back to that school's education, wouldn't it? As you said, let's start, a wealth A level.
Yeah, exactly. And that's in preparation for this discussion, that's what I thought is financial health education for 12, 14-year-olds. Get them interested and understanding what this is all about, so that they stand some chance in the future. I've been very lucky, as I said at the start of the call, through my career, the jobs I've had, and now the time to start consolidating things that I know where I stand from a wealth perspective. Many people don't actually get that kind of opportunity, and so anything I can do to help people do that, I'm happy to. I know you're looking for the silver bullet here, Chris. The thing that's going to unlock everything, and we talked a little bit earlier today about this, about the industry is not transparent. There's a lot of hidden secrets that go on, and the one thing I would remove from the industry is the opacity.
Yes.
Right, the fact that you can't really look through and understand what's going on in terms of fees and are things really free when you're on your Revolut account and you're exchanging currency, or you're doing your Bitcoin trade or whatever? Is it really free, or are you losing money because you're taking an unpreferential rate that somebody's making their money on, right? That's what I'd love to try and eradicate, is have more transparency, so that things were very, very clear in terms of what things cost and what value you're actually getting back.
I like that as a point, because it's only when things are transparent and measured, and then you can manage and change them in the direction that best fits.
Yeah. Exactly.
You're not a dictator to say it has to be like this. However, we're all in this together. So therefore, let's try and work out what best fits, each individual and each tribe, or each cohort.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Exactly.
That makes sense to me. Andy, have you got any points?
Thank you, Trevor. I'm walking away. I'm just looking down at my notes. The holy trinity of home, cash, and pensions. I think that's good advice. And I can act on that almost immediately when I recover from my quiz performance. I like the idea of the wealth A level.
I do.
That would be a very enjoyable experiment to co-create with an exam board, and do so with sponsors. You could have some really exciting curriculum content and visits, and it's live, and importantly, Trevor, it's applied. People could actually make their own selves at the topic of their own coursework and sort of set up a little fund for themselves, and it's quite a good idea. And I liked also a point that you just finished with about value for money. I appreciate that we have to make charges in order to move other people's monies around, otherwise we won't have any funds to build the platforms off which people use, and then we can't pay the salaries of the people that work at Revolut, who are hardworking individuals. But I remember Chris Sear in one of our first interviews talked about value for money, and at the moment people aren't very clear on what the value is. So that's something that's good and important to champion. And I need to brush up on my Japanese manga magazines and a couple of geography books to describe clouds. Once again, I thought I was right.
And Andy, I'm going to take the A level one step further, actually, and say it's not just wealth. I think you could also do entrepreneurship as well, because interestingly, a lot of the wealth that's being generated these days is from these younger entrepreneurs with startups, going through the whole SPAC process, particularly in the US, also IPOing as well, ultimately. I think if you get to the younger generation early enough about what the potential is from an entrepreneurial perspective, using technology to deliver their particular idea or solution quickly, that folds nicely into that wealth space. So you kind of got two routes, right? You can be Mr. Corporate and go down the Mr. Corporate route, get your pension, happy days, or you may have that mindset of, no, I want to go and do it on my own, and have my own thing, and I want to know how to manage my wealth in that perspective as well.
It's actually helping to become a wealth generator yourself, isn't it?
Correct.
Entrepreneurship is nothing more than this group of people working for corporate X.
Yeah.
Let's improve our wealth because we're providing better services. So no, I like that idea. I like that. My last question, Trevor, is, and I guess this is a little bit trying to get next interesting person on the hook. Mm-hmm. Who else should we interview? Who would be a good person to pick?
I've got four candidates, right?
This is a bit like that ice bucket challenge, and you're just roping in four.
Exactly. So I got four, and I've got a diverse bunch here to try and stop it being three blokes sitting around the camera talking to each other. But number one is actually a bloke, and he's a lovely man. Actually, I won't call him a bloke. Campbell Fleming, who is the former head of distribution at Standard Aberdeen, now running the big exchange, which we have very similar age, we have similar values as well. He's doing as much as he can to give back around investment advice and offering a platform for investors to easily get access to ESG, socially responsible kind of funds. So Campbell would be a great guy. And
he's really good at Godzilla as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's number one. Then I've got two. When I was at Threadneedle, I worked closely with a couple of the NEDs that we had there, non-exec directors, Kath Cates and Anne Roughhead. They are, women who have gone through the ranks of big corporate and are now providing advice at a board level to asset managers, insurers, about what they need to be doing. So they're quite influential people, and probably have a good idea as to what some of those big organizations are actually doing to tackle the problems that we're talking about.
And then my best behavior, mightn't I, for them?
No, I wouldn't. You wouldn't need to worry, Chris.
Tie and everything. Who knows?
And then the fourth one is somebody that I've met very recently, who is an entrepreneur. Her name's Angela Tsai. She is an ex-marketing Accenture consultant who has worked out that she wanted to start her own business, so come out of big corporate. And what her business is helping individuals build their own brand. And one of the things I've experienced in the last 18 months is coming out of big corporate and coming into the wild west of the outside world is quite a journey to go through, especially with what's been going on with COVID, etc. So that's what she does. She specializes in helping people understand when they're ready to make that journey out of big corporate into the big wide world, getting rid of the warm, comfortable blanket that a big corporate gives you, but then working out what your core brand is going forward as well. So I think she'd be an interesting person to have this dialogue with.
They sound fascinating, and the more that we can leverage you to get them on the hook, the better this series will be.
Indeed.
So, thank you very much, Trevor. Any final thoughts, Andy?
No, thank you very much, Trevor. I've enjoyed our conversation. We always have good chats, you and I. So I'm looking forward to the next time we swap swords. Yeah.
Indeed. It's been a pleasure, guys. Thank you very much indeed.
Have a good evening. Cheers.
All the best. See you.
You've been listening to Remarkable WAM, a podcast that's part of a mission to shake up and explore wealth and asset management. For show notes and details about this week's guest, more episodes and further information about our project, please visit remarkablethinking.com. That's remarkable-thinking.com. My name is Chris Mills, and thank you for listening.